Welcome to Backstage 421, the musicians only podcast, with your host, author, and music lover, Charles Campbell. Charles will have an awesome array of guests from many genres of music, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. By the way, Ray Mattis is the composer of this awesome intro music.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another exciting episode of Backstage 421, the Musicians Only podcast. This is season 2, episode 1, and I have a very special guest today. And he was brought to me by way of Doug Worthen, an awesome guest I had on last year, fine guitarist. But we're speaking with the great Nick Fry. Nick, I am so happy you agreed to come on the show today.
We're both very happy to see you.
Awesome.
I'd have to point this out. A friend of mine made this.
It looks amazing. That is pretty cool. Do they sell those? Does your friend sell those by chance? Just
no,
curious.
she does them for sick children.
Oh,
I'm not sure what category I'm in. But she does it for that, and then decided to do one for me. Honestly.
Well, I call this a musicians only podcast, but man, I went and looked at your bio and some of the things you sent me. You've done a hell of a lot more than be just a musician, my man. You have really you've really been in the stuff. So Nick was born in Boston and he was raised in England, and he came back to the United States, if my information is correct, in 1988, the year after I graduated high school and joined the Navy. So we're close in age. We're in the ballpark. But Nick, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me. And it's obviously a great honor to be on this. I'm not exactly sure what I would say about why I'm here, other than I might have had some accidental things that worked out well.
Okay. Well, what I want you to do is kind of give my listening audience a little background about yourself. I have a whole bunch of notes here that I took, and we'll get into some of this other stuff. But give us a background about Nick, and kind of how you came up and how you got into music. And I know that's a big, broad, general question, but we'll kind of get into the details as we go along.
Well, like most people, I was born, and I think I was probably quite an obnoxious kid. Just very into everything, and science and art. There are a few people who don't see the difference, and I think that might have been very difficult for my teachers and schooling and so on. But to me, life was always just all part of the same thing. So science and art, physics, chemistry, the beauty of things, emotional components of life, all of those things are they're all part of the same thing to me. And I've actually had to learn to classify things in a classical way. Sometimes you have to wear the hat of being the nerd, the computer nerd. You've got to do things in a studio that is sometimes very technical. I learned to fly a plane as well. I can do those things at the same time as some people, if they meet me, may very well think that I am just an artist and all about emotion. And so you just have to kind of work out that I think there are a lot of people who, I'm not putting myself in the same category as the greats, but I can identify with them.
Right.
That perhaps they look at the world and go, okay, so we've got a sunset to do with all sorts of things, diffusion, diffraction, impedance of different frequencies, Chartreuse effect, all of that physics going on. And wow, doesn't it look amazing? And doesn't just make you want to cry with joy.
Absolutely, man. And I get exactly where you're coming from. And that's when I started reading through your bio. I was like, wow, this cat has done a lot of things, and he's been all over the place. So I'm really glad that I didn't just dig into the music side. You mentioned you're a cinematographer, which is awesome. I watched a trailer for a movie you did not that long ago, 2021, I believe, and it was Making Sense. Definitely want to go back and watch that film.
That was an interesting. Yeah, I played. I got the role basically. This is how the audition went. So you have no sense of smell, right? Our character has no sense of smell.
Right.
That was it. And
Perfect.
I mean, it was a bit more to it, I want to believe. But it came down to basically that they wanted to cast people who had actual quotes disabilities for the purpose of the story. And yeah, it's very hard to find somebody who's anosmic because they don't stick out. 10% of people though, born with no sense of smell, and zero, nothing. I
Yeah.
would be really good in crowd control and things like that. And I
Right.
sense
Right.
what's
Right.
going on.
But I found the concept very interesting. I did watch the trailer, and I am going to go back and watch the movie because it really
Mm.
kind of pulled me in from the trailer. But what I got is they were producing sonic sleeves to turn sounds into pulses for deaf people, and that kind
Well,
of
there was a lot of a lot of cross sense stuff going on.
in the film.
And
Okay.
yeah, and I it's one of those things that you always wish with all of the art. We shot a lot of stuff that didn't get in, which I think was really fundamental, because we did care about it. In fact, I made some good friends with people, and one of my friends is who plays the blind guy in the show is actually very pivotal. Mike Barnett.
Yeah.
He's former Navy as well, and he uh, just really bit off that character, and it was
Right.
cool to do. And there are other people who had other sorts of disabilities, and I basically was just me. So
Right. Right.
there's it's not the biggest disability that you can have. However, I suppose it does give me a bit of a perspective to understand some things like that.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you said. There's a pro and con to not having a sense of smell. I mean, there's some really bad smells out there, but there are some great smells too. So I think I'd rather have my
Yeah.
sense of smell than not. But
Well, let me tell you about a drummer I knew. So there was a band that I was in, and he um just always girls would come up to you after a show or on break or whatever, and to talk to you, and he would be like, "Oh, she smells wonderful." Chad, I'm talking about you. And then one time we were playing, and something went a bit odd. So I turn around, and to the corner of the stage, this girl was talking to him, and it was enough. He didn't lose what he was doing, but it changed. And knew what we were going. The only thing I could think of was she must smell really good.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I had in my notes here, ask about the drummer story. So I'm glad you brought it up. Glad you brought it
Oh
up.
wow, and that's one of the drummers. No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot more. Yeah.
Well, we'll get into these other questions, but you have my
Okay.
curiosity piqued. What's the other drummer story? I really want to hear that. If
Oh
there's
well,
a
I don't know
really
which one you're talking about.
uh, well,
So,
you put a little note in a message you sent to me. Ask about the drummer story. So I don't know which one.
oh right, okay. Well, the recordings I'm assuming you heard. Um, there are two drummers on that. This just rewind a little bit. I'd recorded some stuff on analog 16 track. What would have been in 1992 to 94, so a long time ago. And about 5-ish years ago, I realized I've probably got to do something with these tracks, get them off before you can't anymore.
Right, right.
So I found one place close enough by, about 50 miles from here, who had not only the 1-inch 16 track, but also DBX noise reduction. And some of our audience will know there is actually no digital way to recreate what DBX did for the DBX Type 1 in the analog way. There's everything else we've been
Yeah.
able to do. There might have been, but nobody's put any work into it. But anyway, also to do with the tape levels and all kinds of stuff. So I found one place that had that. And primarily I wanted to extract the performances of these two really fine drummers,
Right.
because they have both subsequently passed away. One for sure, the other we really believe he probably must have. And so as tragic as it is, but also somewhat humorous in the Spinal Tap way, I'm working with drummers who have passed
Or
away,
pass. Yeah, yeah.
listening to these old tapes, living through that. And there is something, you've heard the stuff. I'm not wrong, right? This has nothing
No,
to do
not
with
really.
my writing of the songs. They are great, wouldn't you
Yeah,
say?
yeah. They are.
Yeah.
They are fantastic.
And um, Craig and John, characteristic wise, completely different. Craig, an English teacher. John, um, what I would call him is a creative scarecrow, is probably a way of putting it. Really wild guy. He looked like Lieutenant Dan from Castaway, and the long hair. He looked like a Vietnam
Right.
vet, and he unfortunately, I think he passed away probably due to a lot of circumstantial things, along with
Right.
probably how his lifestyle was, which is a real pity because the last person I spoke to about him, which was his ex-wife, said that she last saw him kind of on the street and didn't, how can you help someone like that they were just dissolving themselves. And I
Right.
found a lot of brilliant people have been like that. I've been so lucky that I haven't succumb to that side of the, I guess, arts and the industry.
Right.
I'm
Right.
usually just too nerdy, too busy doing something to go and party or anything like that, and
Right.
I just never was a thing. And now,
Well,
sort of pre-diabetic, I'm not doing any alcohol even.
right.
So
Right. Well, that's a story as old as time. With
yeah.
super creative people, and the paths that sometimes are chosen for them. Sometimes they don't even choose those paths, and they get kind of thrust into them, and it's tragic.
Well, Craig, who's the other drummer, who's he's more the Neil Peart influence, more of the power progressive metal drummer. He um the story that I heard, and it was difficult to talk to him after we'd done the recording. We were going to play live, and we could never connect. And the one rehearsal that he did show up for, unfortunately, he didn't bring his drums, and he said, well, I can't get to them. They're at a place and I haven't got the key. And it turns out he'd pawned them. And again,
Right.
a tragic situation. And his wife as well, I contacted subsequently. As I understand it, he, as an English teacher, was, I don't want to repeat the story incorrectly, so I'm just going to say that he was an English teacher in a school where there was a school shooting, and it did a number on his mind.
Gotcha.
And he never really quite recovered from that. And I can understand that,
Yeah. Yeah. He never
Yeah.
came out of it completely. I
Yeah.
gotcha. Well, let's get
Fantastic
on.
guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, get on with it. Let's
Let's
actually talk about something.
let's get on a happier note here.
Yeah.
Now there's one question that jumps out at me from reading your bio, but before I ask that question, I want to know, as a kid and coming up as a teenager, who were some of your musical influences? Who did you listen to? We're about the
Well, you
same
know
age,
what?
so I'm interested in this.
Oh, okay. So here's the interesting thing with that. Up until about the age of 16, uh I'm not quite sure why, other than I thought it was the thing to do. I was really only listening to classical music. I really wasn't listening to a lot of rock.
Okay.
And when people would play it to me, I'd have this sort of, no, it's not real music, BS, And one day, I can't remember exactly what it was. I do remember a particular time where I do remember there being a door opening. And I think this might have been, there are two times back when I was about 6, my dad showed me a tape recorder for the first time, reel-to-reel tape deck.
Right.
He bought it when he had come to America, so it could only work on American voltage. So he had to get a British Variac, which was really difficult to get, from his lab. He was a PhD in chemistry, and I was absolutely hooked. I've got to do this. I don't know what it was. The light came down from some heavenly place, and this was what I knew I wanted to do. And I was saving up my money for batteries, and just had to do it, whatever
Right.
it was. I was making stories and things like that, and you learned a lot about tape decks when you're 6 and you get stuff on the heads and you have to clean it, and it starts to slow down and you know why, and you learn about tape and oxiding and shedding and keeping the pinch reel clean, all those things that you you can read about, but if you inherently do it just by basically almost like learning to drive by crashing a car.
Right.
And then my aunt, so she is significant twice now. My English adopted aunt, she brought over another microphone, and it sounded different. Wow, brain. They sound. Why? I actually like the look of the one that sounded worse, in my opinion, wasn't as clear.
Right.
Yeah, I like the look of this one, but that one sounds better. So I learned something about women this way. Maybe it's not all about looks. Anyway, so then jump forward. You've asked me, to think about it. So about, another 10 years. I remember she playing Led Zeppelin, Whole Lot of Love, on
Yeah.
her stereo system, because she had a good stereo system. For some reason, we didn't. We didn't have a television, really, black and white old thing that was, you have to kind of hit the work, and didn't have a microwave till I was about 18, if I,
Yeah.
get those numbers correct. Yeah, that sort of thing. My parents weren't really technical people, even though Dad was a scientist. And so she had this quite nice system. I remember, as a garage turntable, Sansui amplifier, and Wharfdale
Oh yeah.
speakers, which
That's
was infinitely better than what I had, which is, a radio this big, or the speaker in that tape deck. And I was just like, it was over there in that speaker. And then the other stuff started. And then I was just, again, that was another I'm hooked moment. Then all of a sudden, yes, there's a space for classical and the space for, it's all the same thing. Again, I ran into that whole same thing. I'd made the mistake of categorizing things. So to answer your question about what influenced me, I think it was searching for that,
right.
that pow, that smack in the face, that's, the beautiful hit of the excitement of that sunset, the beauty of it, the uniqueness of it, but the sameness of it at the same time, and somehow hitting you everywhere, which is why I think I've really gravitated to doing movies, because you can be behind the camera, you can be doing the audio, you're doing sound effects, you're making a squeak, an oven door. You might record an oven door to sound like a squeaky door in a car.
Oh yeah.
A pitch change it, and it's kind of one big lie in a way. It's all smoke and mirrors. At the same time, it is creative. There's a creative nature to it, and telling the story, and music's all part of that same thing. So, but as yet, I haven't recorded any oven doors for any songs. Maybe now I should.
Well, maybe, yeah. And my other podcast, I talked to quite a few directors, and they come up with creative ways, like you said, to for sound effects and stuff like that. So the oven door kind of resonates with me. They do stuff exactly like that. So that's pretty cool. Now
Well, movies are almost always, I mean, to one degree or another. You say when independent movies, you might have a $10,000 or $100,000 budget, maybe $500,000. Then you get into the $2, $3, $10 million projects. But to some degree, those $1 million projects are just another $1 million pieces. That's all
right,
they are.
yeah,
And sometimes there's some extravagance and some bling, but a lot of times we're still using not duct tape, gaffer tape. We're still using, the same equipment.
right.
It's just in a context that is bigger. Yeah.
Exactly. And maybe the equipment's a little more expensive. Maybe it's a little nicer, but it's the same concept. So, and you
It's just more
guys,
of it usually.
more of it.
There are a lot
Yeah.
of REs now. A lot of people have them. People own really nice cameras.
Yeah.
The stuff I take out for recording is, it's the same.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
hopefully I can use it as well.
Well, hell,
Hopefully,
people are shooting movies on iPhones now. So it's, that's crazy.
they are and they're not.
It's crazy to me.
They
But
are.
anyway,
They are.
that's
Yeah.
not my forte. That's not my
Okay.
field of expertise. But I've talked to some directors. But yeah,
Yeah.
I got you. What I wanted to follow that up with, and I thought this was interesting, it said you have created something called the Franken bass, and I want to know what that is and how
It
you put it together.
Well, let me tell you. So, unfortunately, the Frankenbase is no more.
Is it RIP? Oh no,
It
no
is
Franken bass.
because um, it was one of the few casualties of a rollover. in the trailer.
Ah,
I have been living in, this is the second trailer now. The studio is actually in a trailer.
right.
This is a 30-foot. I had a 22-foot, which I lived in a lot for about 7 years, and studio's built into it. And I just like that, because if I want to move, because I had a situation where I had lost the house that I was in to, the renters, the landlords have sold it from under
Mhm.
me
Right.
3 times in a year. It's just, I hated moving. So I thought, well, I'm just going to put a box on wheels,
There you
put
go.
everything in there, and live as, tightly as possible. Realize that, you can't collect too many things. Well, I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't know, 7 or 8 guitars in here, which, isn't a lot by Doug's standards, for example. We'll get back to talking about Doug. And, obviously Joe Bonamassa or somebody, and I'm sure Dave Gilmour has got a few million more than I could ever wish for. But in terms of the size that you are. And so I was moving one time. I'd just come up a hill at 30 miles an hour, and some punch of wind. It was all balanced. I had all sorts of things. I had new tires actually on the
Oh,
front
wow.
and the back. So, the Suburban pulling it. It was only a short trailer, so I didn't need a huge truck. Again, I was going so slowly, but it just weather vaned the whole thing and basically caught in the median, and then it flipped. So we did a 360. And actually, if it wasn't so tragic, it was kind of fun. It's just dunk, dunk, dunk. I,
Oh,
I realized one thing, at least me, my height, center of gravity goes right through you, so your head doesn't flop around. In my case, at least, if the vehicle spins, you're kind of just axially oriented. And I just all the airbags went off, and except the
oh,
steering wheel one, which was good because that didn't smack me in the face. But so anyway,
oh, man.
luckily, like the Strats and the PRS and the ones that I had more of a emotional connection to, other than the Franken bass, unfortunately, because I'd made the body of it out of mahogany. Mahogany is, I've noticed all the guitars I've ever had that are mahogany have either broken or I'm scared they're gonna. On tours, I've seen guys open their case and then the headstocks just popped
Just,
off.
oh, man.
Because mahogany has got a sort of brittleness to it, I think, and it can't take a lot of impact. Well, it destroyed the body of this thing. And because I was in, I guess, some sort of mode of get everything off the freeway, I just told them to throw it away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me tell you the story of it. So back in England, there was a place called Touchstone Tonewoods, and this would have been early 80s. Actually, I remember you might want to look this up. I was working on that bass, building it, because I was a poor starving artist. Bring out the little violin. When Spirit of Radio was still in the charts, or when it was actually climbing up the charts. And I remember thinking, I want to do that. I want to try and sing like Geddy and play like, do stuff like that. If you talk about influences, and when I'll say something as well, I think a lot of it, artists might resonate with. Influences sound like you're copying them. I've got to the point now when I talk to other people who've come up with something,
Hmm.
I'll say, oh, I can see that such and such an audience that likes this will probably gravitate to your stuff, because I think it's more common that people do really, they'll look at the sunset or some trees, and just come up with something that may have there's a language. I've got my keyboard here, but it's not on.
Right.
But boom boom, I'm a giant.
Right.
Bling bling bling, I'm a pixie. I don't know,
Right.
something in the middle. There I go. See how excited I was. And so there's a universal language of those things. We know what taunting is. Na 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 na.
Right.
That sort of thing from a psychological standpoint. Uh, as I understand it, you can go to any playground in the world. Kids who do not know each other, never seen anything, will do that to each other to taunt them.
Right.
There's obviously laughter and all sorts of things. There's a universal language. And so there are some things. And if you hear a band that does what you like, because, oh, hey, they see the world I do, the way I do, then you could, sometimes it's like they went across the minefield first. oh, it's possible to do that. The danger is that sometimes, I'm sure, trillions of people, uh, euphemistically, he says, have written the same song,
Oh yeah, yeah.
and and then you find out that somebody else had already done it, or subconsciously, and of course, some of the greats have been accused of such things.
Oh yeah.
So, influence-wise, I would hope my influence are, the passions and the seven deadly sins, and anything that's out there of life. As someone who also likes, pretends, hopes he can write scripts and things, you at least are an observer of things, and you use those languages. Now, production is also another thing. How can you take that song, that chord progression, and maybe even hide that it's EAD, maybe G, and somehow squash it a bit? And I would think at that point, then it's the difference between fast food and gourmet food. It's in the preparation and the presentation.
Right.
It's not a trick. It's still edible. And if we're talking about some of the things, if we count out the real junk food, I'm just talking about the corner cafe versus 5-star.
Right.
What is their difference, and is there a difference? Is it worth it? And I guess we all hope.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome stuff, man. You give me a great insight into what makes you tick, and I appreciate that for sure. I want to kind of, and I know this is a music podcast, but I want to kind of jump back over to the television side for just a minute. We'll talk about Doug too. We're going to bring Doug up. But
Okay.
another thing I found very interesting, and guys, go check out Nick Fry, nickfry.com. I'll put links below. He's got all kinds of cool stuff going on. But it said you produced a television show from 1998 to 2002 called The Fluid. And if I wrote this down correctly, it's the name of the show was A Man, a Camera, and a Pair of Shorts.
Yeah.
I kind of want to hear about that a little
Well,
bit.
yeah,
What
Fluid
was that about?
Television. Yeah, Fluid Television. The Fluid Television show, not to be confused with MTV's Liquid Television, which actually I didn't know about until after I started making mine.
Well, it's case in point in
Uh,
what you just talked about. But anyway, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. I guess so, I try to stay connected. At the same time, maybe I should be more connected. I get that, but so liquid television, fluid television, the only similarity is that it seems to be about the same sort of word, but it's not interchangeable.
Right.
And it was also before the idea of fluidity in society was even another word. Like now, I still actually have my license plate that's just fluid. Well, I'm probably not going to use that ever again because it might get misinterpreted. I have nothing against people who want to be sexually fluid. It just isn't me. So,
Right.
so unfortunately, that sort of changed it in the perspective of life. But the idea was it was supposed to be a show that was it was the tagline: a man, a camera, and a pair of shorts. The mission to find anything interesting. That all derived from some of the tests that I was doing, and one of my friends just saw a picture of me holding the camera, and he goes, "That's a man, a camera, and a pair of shorts." I thought, well, I'm going to use that,
Yeah.
and um at first I was a bit worried about it, and then I thought, nah, that's all right, we'll go with that. And it seemed to work. We were on uh, a actually there was um, a low power television, 1,000 watts, which really only gets you a few blocks.
Right.
And he took a risk in one way, but on another, the rest of his programming was all copyright free, black and white movies from the 40s.
Right.
And my show, which was me just going, you can probably understand the dynamic version, actually going out to people and just asking them stuff
Yeah.
about what they liked. And when people started to realize what I was about, they would come up to me and they would try and jump over their car. Now, it's a lot of stuff that you see now on the internet and on shows. But when I first started doing it on the owned and operated CBS station here in Utah on KUTV, after doing the low power, because it kind of graduated itself, it got a bit of momentum from kind of cult followers, musicians and so on, because I do a lot of that stuff. And all I cared about was, did somebody do something that was interesting and were they passionate about it? So there are people who collected Lego, nothing really new, especially now, but at the time I was doing it all from behind the camera. I tried to get people to be you know, sort of hosts of the show, but they didn't really take it seriously. They didn't know what I was on about. One time I was doing a screen test with this girl and these guys walked by and she just followed them. She'd had enough. And so, and in fact, that's what started me doing it from behind the camera, because I had a pit pass for the jet car races. Oh, well, I'll just go in there, and I had the TV camera, big old,
Right.
Sony BVW200 for those who care about what that is. I go in there and I started talking to jet car racers. And I was going to initially take my words out. I knew that if I asked them to repeat the question, then I could take my questions out. Well, I showed some of the tests to people saying, I'm going to cut this up better. And they, well, we kind of like you from behind the camera. It's just a new thing. Again, everyone's doing it now on the
It's
internet
a
with their phones.
I was gonna say
Yeah,
it's a new thing then, but now it's
yeah.
everywhere.
Well, I was actually doing the first digital editing of a television show, at least here in this state, and possibly the country, and doing the music and just doing all this stuff. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what rules I was breaking or if there were any. I just did this thing, and they would put it on all these different times. And there was one time there was some sort of strike, and they put it on instead of Dan Rather's news. And the way the ratings were, I've got them somewhere. The households using televisions actually went up, and it stuck for the second. The way they do all their ratings is very sort of algorithmic, and they never asked me to do it again, even though it went up. Interesting.
Wow.
I thought, what a pity. Again, get out the things. But what I stopped liking was, though, that the audience wanted it more and more radical instead of just interesting.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to get into people doing silly stuff.
Well, you see that way too much now on social media. Way too much.
I think so. It's sometimes interesting to watch somebody, fall off a swing into a pond.
Organic. If it's like
Yeah,
organic and it's captured,
Yeah.
that's one thing. But if it's like prompted and some of the pranks, and I don't mean to cut you off, but it kind of irritates me when I see this. In my opinion, someone else may find it entertaining, but a lot of it I find just garbage for me.
What I was trying to do was encourage people to maybe not worry that, because everyone's a bit odd,
Right. Yeah, we all have our quirks.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's which way do you put the toilet paper, for goodness, for example.
Yep.
All of those things you could probably point a finger at somebody and say that's really strange. But if they have a really deep interest in a thing, and they're actually, it's not turn them into complete lunatics. Those are the people I found interesting. I think they what makes the world go round, and as artists and musicians, we can justify it. But if all you like to do is collect, one person liked to collect those. They weren't actually Lego people. They were kind of like the Lego people, I think.
Yeah.
It's so long ago, I can't remember. It was a long time ago. It's 25 years ago. But he had like 500 of them. He just kept collecting them, and people would send them to him. Totally harmless, nice guy, normal in every other way, I suppose. Don't know, but he seemed to, and he had like a wife and family and stuff. So somehow he managed to survive.
Well, it's like you said, we all have our quirks, and people find things, and that's why we're humans. I mean, people find things entertaining. Like I may find something entertaining that you don't find entertaining. So, but a lot of the stuff out there right now that you see on social media, that a lot of the reality kind of stuff that is supposedly done in the moment is scripted, and I don't know, it's just not funny or entertaining to me. A lot of it, some of it is, but I'd say about 90% for me is not for me. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and some people, will it's like when it comes to, say, any times of styles, genres of stuff. And the thing that's interesting to me is there are certain styles of music that I might have all of very good set of parameters as to why I don't like it. I
Right.
might say it's repetitive, or it doesn't seem to have any emotion. But you can say the same things about blues rock, and I love blues rock. I mean, it's really 145. What else can you do with it?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
you can go farther out and extend it, and again, like I was saying before,
Yeah.
that kind of twisting of the idea to try and not necessarily hide, but change the perspective, and just even your chord voicings and so on is
Yeah.
like so that nobody knows they're necessarily listening to blues progression. But sometimes you want to write a blues song, like "What Do You Want Me to Be," the one of mine.
Well, actually, we're going to
I
get into that too. That's actually my favorite
Okay.
song
Oh, really?
off of the EP. But yeah, the blues thing, you know, da 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 da
Yeah,
da 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 da. And my dad's a
yeah.
musician too. He plays all the string instruments, and he's pretty good. He never like really pursued it, but he's almost 80 years old, but he could play anything with strings on it and the harmonica and all that stuff. So I've been around string instruments all my life, and he plays the blues a lot, and it's different words, same chords.
And so much of it, and what I really enjoy, it country rock, blues rock can do the same thing. There's a bit more space in it.
Right.
Some of the stuff I've written is so squashed in, and I have to have all these counterpoints. I guess it's probably my classical influences going, well, you can't just do block chords. You've got to have lines. Some people may be competing for it. I would say supporting.
Right.
And then sometimes I've written stuff where I'm concerned about whether it's too full, and then other times I'm concerned about it's too empty. You
Yeah.
haven't heard the really empty stuff. That's going to be coming up this year, where it's just me and a guitar or something. And for a reason, though, for example, one of the songs that will be out was just inspired by walking through the London Underground, the Tube, and hearing somewhere some sound. Because if you've ever been there or seen it, it's like other subways, but you have this three-dimensional network of tunnels,
Hmm.
and so sound can, and it's all tiled, so sound just goes anywhere. And I was just thinking, oh, where is this sound coming from? At first, it was just more harmonic than anything. So, then I
Right.
realized it was these guys on. It was an electric guitar and somebody singing. Well, we get closer, and in the rush hour, everybody just trudges along. Like when you get off a train for going to a concert, you're just all trudging along. You just follow everybody. You could almost
Oh
like
yes.
put your arms up and lift your legs up and go along if you really wanted to. And I'm hearing this sound, it's getting louder and louder. And then suddenly I realized I remember just being somehow seeing one little hole to be able to look down. I saw these rubber gloves, these really thick, like the gloves that Scotty would use when he was working on the engines on the Enterprise.
Oh yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what are they doing down there? And I look up, and these two guys had an amplifier, but they'd bashed a hole in the side of the wall and
Oh.
hot wired their amplifier. And he's playing with a Strat, and the guy was singing. And the two of them were just, having a good old time busking somehow without getting squashed. I just remember this as a snapshot, thinking, isn't that interesting? So I actually downplayed it even more and did it with just an acoustic guitar. And it's called Journeyman. Again, not to be confused with the Eric Clapton Journeyman or people who work construction. But it was the idea that obviously what was good, firstly, was all this echoing that I experienced at the same time as their incredible greatness and possibly narcissism, probably criminal act, which somehow this was all in the days of punk, as although they weren't playing punk stuff, I think they were probably playing something sort of bluesy, if I can sort of remember it. And it just hit me, was the moment, the feeling of the moment was they had to do this amazing thing, whatever it was. Let's bash a hole in the wall and then play with all our heart. So I thought I had to write a song, influenced by that.
That's awesome, man. And that takes some, you know, That takes some gumption too to bash a hole in the wall and hardwire your amp.
Well, I knew some people who would go actual busking, some classical player friends of mine. Hello, Chris. And Chris actually played some of the violins, the real violin stuff on my stuff, although there's an equal amount of keyboards. But
right.
He was telling me that it was worth going busking because it was whatever the charge for busking without a license was, you could make in an hour anyway. So you may as well just go and do it.
And pay the fine
And
if
so,
needed, right? Yeah.
yeah, in a way, it's kind of like, what are those things? Right? The city gets some money, you get some money, we all get some money. And they were really good. They could play, he was the second chair in the London Sinfonietta. So that level of greatness to be able to just walk by, somebody's going to give them a buck.
Nice. Those are good stories. I really, really enjoy those. That's pretty cool. I'm gonna switch gears one more time, then we're gonna talk about Doug just for a couple of minutes, and then we're gonna switch over to the now. But the thing I don't want to end this podcast without asking you about, these people were huge in the 80s, man. They were bigger than many people today would ever know. But I want to talk about Air Supply.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Still big. Still going.
they're still big, they're still going, but no one, outside of people in our age bracket knew today. They don't know how big they actually were in the 80s. So a lot of the younger folks, they were huge. They were part of my teenage years and childhood. But unless I got this wrong, you directed one of their DVDs, a 30th anniversary DVD. And if that is true, I want to know about that. That sounds
Yes.
pretty daggum cool to me.
Well, yeah, actually, there's a bit missing. There's even an additional thing.
Okay, well, tell me about it.
Well, let's rewind.
Back it up.
So just like a lot of people, before I met them, all I knew was All Out of Love, Lost in Love.
Lost in Love, and I don't
That was
know
it.
much.
Those two.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm sure I'd slow danced with somebody,
Oh, yeah.
Girls loved it, and
Oh.
I remember thinking it was well-produced stuff, but it wasn't necessarily on my radar because this was, of course, at the time that, AC/DC, Van Halen,
Oh, yeah.
power bands were playing. There was still the echoes of Zeppelin and Hendrix in my zeitgeist, as well as going all the way over to the other end and still listening to Wagner and Liszt and Respighi and people like that. But sort of like sticking this all together. But I do remember thinking it was really well produced stuff because they had real orchestrations.
Their melodies were amazing.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah.
But I didn't buy an album, back when that was the way you could only really hear it, other than the radio, and that was only the singles. And so go forward a bit. I'm doing my television show, and station here did something that's kind of it throws you through a loop when you hear what it's called. They call it the pregnant bikini competition, which is both raw go girl at the same time as really, and I thought, this is curious, this is perfect for my show. And I did 1 year of it, and then the second year, and I knew the DJs, they said, yeah, come on down. And then they said, well, when I was there, oh, we're going to have Air Supply come, because Graham lives in Park City near here.
Right.
And Russell, I guess, was here, or they maybe come down on purpose. So the two of them showed up, and they played Every Woman in the World to me. Right.
Nice.
Yeah. So they're singing that while these girls are going by. And I suppose there's, it's one of those things. I think it was really good and healthy from the standpoint of feeling, really being pregnant should be the ultimate expression of woman bodiness, shouldn't it? It really is what it's all about. And so they're singing that, everything. And then afterwards, I'm talking to them, interviewing them, never met them before. I wouldn't have recognized them. Start talking, but you could tell who they were the moment they walked. Like the whole room changed.
Yeah.
It wasn't the reaction of other people, but that's the thing with greatness. I've met some other people, Dustin Hoffman, Diane Lane. The moment they're there,
Yeah, the
this
presence is
short,
felt. Yeah.
short little Dustin, right? You know, he
Yeah.
just fills the room. And that's the same thing with a lot of, I think, the very strong, the people who are somebody for whatever reason. It, I don't know what their thing is. There is just that common feeling being around that sort of people. So I'm talking to them, and Graham says, "You should meet my wife." I'm like, what do you mean by that? That's getting weird now. And he said, no, she's doing something for the Miss Utah USA. And so I did a piece on them, and we followed them up to. They did that year the Miss USA in Gary, Indiana, the murder capital of the country, at least at the time. I met the pathologist. It was emceed by William Shatner. And
Oh.
it was a bizarre experience for me anyway, because I went from sort of just trying really hard to get my little show up to next thing I know,
Yeah.
really branching out. And then Graham and Russell were doing an acoustic unplugged version of their hits. So just went to the studio and I shot them doing their stuff in front of mics and stuff in the studio in at Graham's place. And put that together and it became a DVD, and that went nicely. You know, it sort of looked all right and they liked it by today's standards, really low tech, but I think we got something that said what it was supposed to say.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then you know, wait a few years and then they said, hey, we want to do an actual music video for a new song, not one of the hits, called I Adore You. And basically that went from idea to doing it, I want to say, in about 2 weeks,
Oh, wow.
something like that. It was really, really quick. I just remember thinking it was Thursday, normal Thursday, Friday, wake up, Graham calls me, do we want to do a video? Okay. And we put it together. We found a location. We came up with a story. At the time, I was also running a rescue farm and for a friend. And we had a lot of peacock feathers. So we used I had hundreds of these peacock feathers that come off the peacocks. So we used them in there, and it's this universal sign of love, you know, and all this sort of thing.
Right.
And we created this little thing. It was, I think, you know, I hope it went well. It seemed to have worked well. And then again, sort of flatlined for a bit, and then they called and said, "Do you want to go on tour? We want to make a documentary." So yeah, so I went on tour with them for 6 months, and
Wow.
that was quite an interesting thing. You know, you do more flying in those 6 months than the whole rest of my life combined. Lots of countries, I got lots of visas, saw lots of the world, and you know, very thankful to have done that, and fascinating to see their fan base and the band very strong. And also the first time I saw one of the actual shows, which was earlier,
Right.
I remember thinking, oh, I do know a lot of these songs. You just didn't know it was them.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
that's quite typical of a lot of bands. Even now I listen to something on the radio and I'm still a little bit confused as to, it might be a classic rock song, but who is it exactly? And so those guys have really gone the distance. And this was 2017, I think, something like 16 to 17. And now they've surpassed far more than they had, because they had gone. I was there specifically to show the run up to the 5,000th concert.
Right.
And so 5,000 concerts, I worked that out, was one every 3.42 days or something like that.
Oh.
Because obviously there were sometimes you
Yeah.
did more and other times they had days off, but that was a consistent number of days, number of concerts turned into that. And even some of the other greats hadn't done quite that density of touring. And then there are others who have done, you know, maybe more, but they've been going longer.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They've
then
been
you can
together
offset it
for
with,
50
yeah,
years or something. Yeah.
or they're doing fewer concerts, but maybe bigger venues continuously, whereas of course all of them were doing the huge stadiums at some point. But
Right.
when we did some of the South American venues, that was huge. It was stadia, like just. One thing about like Argentina, for example, was they're having such a great time. Then I realized there's no bars, and they just don't do that. They don't publicly drink.
Right.
And I thought they were having just as good time as other environments where there is. I just thought that was very interesting, especially by comparison.
Well, that gave them something to do. They probably came out in mass.
Well, yeah, there was, yeah, and even without not being able to speak the languages of some of these countries, they can usually get by with Google Translate. But in the crowd, all they would do is this,
Right. Right.
and that was enough. But what was really fascinating, and I thought this was so powerful, there are some people who would go to 20, 30, 40 shows a year. I don't know what they must be able to work on the road and somehow generate, unless they're independently wealthy. Didn't get into it, didn't matter. Oh, hey, how you doing?
Right.
You again in another country, not just from state to state.
Right.
They
Yeah,
actually somehow were there.
that's an
Yeah,
entirely different level. Yeah.
and every concert, this is something that probably other nationalities have, but what I noticed very specifically was there was always Filipinos there.
Yeah.
There was a row of them. Hey, they're all singing, having a great time. I'll be like, sometimes it was the same people, but otherwise there was just a Filipino contingent. And then there was one time we were flying somewhere Midwest, sort of nothing to the horizon, and I looked down, and it's one of those little spidery roads, and I see this little area of something, town. I want to say probably 12 houses or something.
Right.
And I looked at, and I realized something very interesting, that where people might criticize art as being, say, a pointless endeavor, what I found fascinating was you could land that plane and someone, if they didn't recognize Graham and Russell, will probably recognize one of the songs.
Yeah.
And that made me realize that they'd actually created a change in the brains of people, of humanity. If you think of Beethoven, da 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 da,
Oh yeah.
everybody knows that, right? There's no doubt you could go to anywhere in the world, China to the Middle East to London to where. I wouldn't be surprised if it wouldn't take much. I wonder if you could do some research and find out, what age does that become just part of the zeitgeist?
Right.
It's language of music that we all understand. And I was just thinking, so interesting that, these guys who, I mean, they became friends and I knew them, and, we eat and whatever and talk about life. But they were so much more than that. And then I realized there's a real responsibility to it.
Yeah.
It's enormous. And I don't know if that's always taken into account with some artists, but they're doing their thing. So whatever that is.
Well, they're more than just someone's favorite singer. They're ingrained. It's like you said, that they've made changes on a global level in people's minds. And
Right.
Your example, if you step off that plane and there's a tiny little town, but they know them or they know their song, that's pretty powerful. That's pretty
I will say
insane.
though, one time that was funny, we came off the plane and all 13 of us, the whole, crew. When I say us, I'm such on the periphery. I realize my position in the whole thing, especially when you're doing the documentary. It was primarily, I was there to talk to the audience anyway. They were coming out of the shows or going into the shows. And how did they enjoy it? Did they have a good time? And anything you'd like to say to Graham and Russell, whatever. And but one time we come off the plane and somebody said, "You must be somebody. You're all wearing dark clothes. You've got flight cases. Who are you?" And I said, "Well, not me. There's the band. I'm just doing this. I can talk to you if you like." So I started, whipped out the camera and started recording. And it's funny because they go, "We knew you were somebody. We thought they were Hall and Oates." So it was a good guess, but slightly wrong at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, that's a great story on Air Supply. I appreciate you expanding what I read about. So there was a lot more than what I thought there was. So I appreciate
Yeah.
that a
So
lot.
the one I would say is, well, there's the singer and the song, which is the DVD. I don't know if that's really even available online, but uh, I Adore You is. I remember
Okay.
hearing that song, and I just called Graham, and I was so excited. I was swearing left and right. "This is really good," he said in code. "This is really, really good stuff." And because it just felt like the same things that they were doing before, but a newer version,
Right.
something new, focus, had that power. Um, it might not have become as great a hit to, the I really don't know how it performed. Um,
Well,
to the fans though,
I
it
jotted
really
it
hit.
down. Yeah, I'll definitely have to go check it out. I mean, I heard Air Supply a lot in the '80s as a teenager, but after that, I kind of
They've,
drifted away from
they,
Air Supply. So I'm
yeah,
definitely gonna
well,
check that out.
I mean, there's a Jim Steinman song that's written for them by him. Most of the time, it's Graham. And but yeah, I mean, they had to. If you can ever catch a show, um, it's the lights are fantastic. When I was out, it was with Troy. I don't think he's with them anymore. The sound is great. They care about what they're doing.
Right.
It's not call it in. Okay, we can just we're us. You'll love us.
Oh
It
yeah,
isn't that.
yeah.
They're always trying to do things. Just as I was leaving, they were talking about changing some of their guitar rig stuff because they just wanted to improve what they were doing. And I talked to um, the guitar tech a little bit about it. I had nothing really to add. They knew what they were doing, of
Yeah,
course.
yeah.
But it was very interesting. I did bring one of my pedals that their guitarist there and used for one or two shows, and then he got his own thing, whatever he
Right.
wanted to do. But it was interesting to see that because some people don't care still. Yeah, they're out, they're doing all right, and yeah, they're doing their gigs, and the fans love
Yep.
them. But Graham and
Well,
Russell, I would say, are really they they're so committed to who they are and what it is that
yeah.
it's what you see is it. That's it.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story in about it's a couple years ago. But and to your point of people who really care about their music. Now, I'm a big Garbage fan, so I don't know if you're familiar with Garbage, Shirley Manson,
Yeah,
Butch
a little
Vig,
bit. Yeah, yeah.
yeah. So love them, love them. Go see them whenever they're close. And they played Atlanta a couple years ago, and they opened for Tears for Fears.
Mm,
I haven't heard Tears for Fears music since
I've
the
seen them.
'80s.
Yeah.
I saw them with Garbage.
Oh yeah.
I was
Oh, this was this
blown.
last tour, wasn't it?
Yeah. I
Yeah, yeah,
was
yeah, yeah,
blown away. And the
yeah.
new
My brother
stuff.
went to it.
Oh
My
yeah,
brother went.
their
Yeah,
new
he said it's
stuff.
great.
As soon as I went to that concert, got their new stuff. I ordered the album. I was
Yeah.
like, wow,
No.
this stuff. Talk about top notch. That the lyrics, the poetry, the stuff they put together in that last record. The Tipping Point is the name of the album.
Hmm.
Man, it just blew me away. So I kind of wanted to bring them up when you were talking about how people that care. Those guys, they had their little riffs and their tiffs and they broke apart for a while, but when they came back together, man, whoo, that stuff is really, really good.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway,
No, definitely.
I
Yeah.
digress. So let's get on the subject of Doug a little bit. We'll talk about Doug for a couple minutes.
Doug Worthen,
I love
Super
Doug
Doug.
Worthen, Super
Yeah.
Doug.
How do you know Doug?
Well, I manage a Facebook page for an artist that I adore. Her name is Jen Wigmore. I don't know if you can see her little poster behind me, but she's a New Zealand artist and she's amazing. Look her up if you get the chance. Doug is also a fan. Was on our Facebook page, so we have an official fan page for her. And so
Okay.
I go to Pappy and Harriet's in California a couple years ago to see Jen in concert play. And this guy walks up to me, hey, and he introduces himself as Doug, and he's got his beautiful wife with him. He says, "Yeah, I know you from the Facebook page." And I was like, "Oh, cool." And so we started talking and chatting, and we became friends at that concert. So now I've been following Doug and seeing what he's doing. He's touring with these awesome musicians. He toured with Caleb Austin not too long ago, who is he's a major country music star as far as I'm concerned now. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got the gazillion followers and all that stuff. And through Doug, I had him on the podcast last year. Long story short is that's how I met Doug, and Doug and I are in constant communication. He reads all the books that I put out. I am a small town horror author.
Well, he's writing as well, of course.
Oh yeah, he is, and
Yeah.
he's supported me. He's purchased every book that I've released. He's gone back and read the back catalog. I have nothing but nice things to say about Doug. So I'm interested to hear how you connected with Doug. Doug's a cool guy. I really like talking to him.
That's a very good question. I'm in constant communication with him. We jammed the end of the summer, which is the first time in a very, very long time. I don't remember how we met though. He was in a band that I put together for some of my stuff in early incarnations, and we had played a little bit. What I liked about him, and I can't remember how we met. It might have been in the old days pre-internet, where I just put a musicians wanted thing or something. That sounds
Well, you've known Doug for a
plausible.
long time. I've only known him a couple of years. So
Yeah, I've known him since would have been 92.
Yeah.
Because that's when I was starting to do all of that stuff again, and
so it's easier for me to remember. I only met him like 3 years ago. So
right. And he's just a consummate musician. And what I liked is, he was supposed to be playing guitar, but he showed up with a guitar synthesizer, or the pickup on his guitar. So he plays guitar parts. The next thing I know, he's doing some of the string things as well. Like, where's this noise coming from? Wonderful noise. And then there was some other things he would do with just the guitar that sounded like some of the other parts of keyboards or backing vocals or flutes or something out of just this guitar. And he can get a sound out of a practice amp that most people can't get out of a full stack. He's people call it finger tone. It's more than that. It's your attitude. It's your way you set it. It's just more than that. He just makes greatness out of nothing somehow, and it just, and we talk about pickups and guitars and microphones, and in my mind, if I can put a band together again, he would be if it's not Doug, it would have to be a very Doug-like creature.
Yeah. Well, shout out to Doug, man. We love you, Doug.
Yeah.
And he listens to this podcast, so.
Well, hey, Doug. Yeah, I'll probably call you before this comes out.
Well, this will be out on February 9th. So just so you know, that's the release date, February 9th, 2024.
And that's coincidentally the date to release of a movie that I did sound for that actually wasn't supposed to be anything other than streaming, like maybe Hallmark style channel stuff. It was healthy enough budget, but it wasn't superstar budget. Well, they've managed to get into theaters. So
nice.
It's going to be in Utah for the first weekend, and if it does really well, then apparently it can be picked up nationally. So if you're in Utah, look for Inheritance to Love. It's it's not Top Gun, it's a rom-com. If you're looking for a Valentine's weekend movie, watch it. I did the best I could with the sound. So
nice.
What we had. But there was one interesting challenge, and that was that the location they had was on a river, but the river went on both sides of it. And when they went to do the location scouting, it was just a trickly stream. And when we went there, it was white water. So let's just say it was it used all of my post-production skills to be able to extract out of that.
Oh man. All right. Well, we're going to switch gears to the final topic of the podcast. I listened to your latest EP called Now.
Oh, that's right. That's what we were talking about. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get some of this other stuff out of the way, and then we get to Now. And I don't mean out of the way in a negative sense. This was all very interesting stuff, and I really wanted to know about this, and I'm sure my audience would love this. You are very entertaining. guest. I love the stories that you've had. You made my job pretty easy today because you've got some really good stories, and we could probably have you back for another episode and do another whole hour of stuff. But let's get on to now. I listened
Well,
to.
as an aside though, when I
Go ahead.
used to do radio, I remember interviewing somebody once, and a musician, and trying to get some answers from them. And I vowed I would never be this person. She just would like, yeah, well, whatever, and all that stuff. I don't know what was on. And she was there with her band, a good band. And I felt it was really interesting. You can go on stage and you can do that thing, communicate. I'm giving you a platform here. And so finally I just said, well, let me refer to your handwritten resume. No, so I never wanted to be that. You've got this wonderful forum, you've got respect for your audience, and I mean, I don't know if what I'm saying is interesting about me, but I hope that what it is something that people can relate to, and other artists can, artists with a capital A, I'm got a little A, and just whatever is, we could talk about it, and if there is anything good that can come from it, the trials, tribulations of, unfortunately, sometimes being born this way, we have to create, we have to, like, one-on-one, I might have anxiety, especially if it's a pretty girl. I don't know what to say. Give me a 9,000 seat auditorium and I'm
You're
there.
fine.
I'll do
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. So that's where I'm coming from. If I can do it,
Yeah.
whatever it is, so can you.
Well,
You.
I'm thoroughly amazed. I mean, you've done things that people work on to do in their lifetime, and you've like have 4 or 5 different careers here, which is amazing to me. And you're not much older than me. And all I do is write books and host podcasts. But hey,
Eh,
you're a cool guy. I really really enjoy
well,
talking to
thank
you.
you. Well, and you must be cool because you're bringing out the cool. Anyway, it's one thing I found interesting, and I hadn't really considered this when I gave it the title, the EP called Now, and you're saying, let's get to now. So here we are
Yeah.
now,
Now.
in now, about now.
Well, talk to me about now. I'm going to let you kind of guide me through now. How did that come about for you? What inspired now? And I do have a
Well,
couple songs that I particularly enjoyed. I enjoyed all 4, but I'm going to be quiet and let you speak.
okay, so that was the process of getting these old songs, these old versions of songs, bring them up to date, remixing, using the drum performances from these two guys that are sadly no longer with us,
Hmm.
and trying to encapsulate whatever it was that made me do it, just partly because of it. I've heard other people use phrases sort of like this, but you're artistically constipated. You've got to get this old stuff out so you can start the new stuff. And so I had to do it, and finding that old analog stuff, getting it off, digitizing it, sitting with it, working with it, ad nauseum for my family and friends. What do you think of this mix? What do you think of this mix? And you can see they're going, great. It's like, no, there's no difference. In fact, Doug was very helpful as well with all of this. He would make very constructive criticisms. And so that I just chose almost randomly, except for Sun, the song's Sun. That I did that on purpose because that was my Everest. It was the biggest thing. I knew it had to be huge. It
I
had to have dynamics.
I
Um,
wrote a little note, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I wrote a little
yeah,
note beside Sun. And I don't want to insult you in any way because it's not meant as an insult. I thought it was a great song, but I wrote Sticks beside it.
you know, here's what's interesting. You're not the first person to have said stuff like that. One of the things that I do notice on occasion,
Gotcha.
that was the same sound, and that triggered something in her mind. But anyway, no, I see where you're coming from on that, and I think one of the things I've always tried to do is push my range. And on Bring Me Home, I actually get to a C6, which I didn't know I could do. I'll tell you the story behind that. Anyway, so Sun, I tackled that first because it was the behemoth. It was all of the texture, that beginning with the natural sounds, not trying to be new agey. What I actually imagined was it was based a little bit on what I used to do as a really obnoxious kid. I would put my amplifier in the window of the house, open the window, and go out into the yard and play. And my neighbors, I remember the next door neighbor would go, no, no, no. And my dad would be like, it's a work day. Why can't he do this? And so it was very interesting. There was this idea I had in my mind of the equal, not competitive, not to obliterate, but to equally connect with the sound of the rising sun. What happens on the earth? Obviously, the sun makes no sound, but the birds and the trees, everything sort of comes alive, and the sound of everything alive, as well as I just imagine 20 Marshall stacks over the horizon, maybe in a Stonehenge arrangement, full stacks, and it'd just be the sound coming up over the horizon. And I'm not sure I got there. I really wanted that to be. I don't know if anybody's got that image. They do now if they listen to this. And then the rest of it starts, and it becomes, a more normal sort of song. And one of the things I've always tried to do is write things that could be regarded as positive. I've got some songs that aren't, but the first four I thought, let's do something that was a little bit at least inspirational, hopefully.
Yeah.
And so that was just in enormity. So to me, that was it starts off, you got the dawn, then you got brightly shining, all that sort of stuff. Morning sun rays the day, all of that. You go into that. And then the idea of, I don't know, more narrative. This wasn't about me specifically, as just watching other people. When we were younger, we would go camping, and you'd see people getting up and kids going and playing and things like that. I guess it has a more progressive, serious rock sound to it, but it really is supposed to be just playful. And the idea that the whole universe is contributing to your existence in a lovely way. Well, why not just, accept that and enjoy it and go for it? And I wanted it to be stadium feeling, not so much from the standpoint of focus on what's going on stage, but the idea that there is this whole group of people that they're all aligned, maybe we can all just have a good time. And so it's got this sort of thing, and I have this idea that someday I have played it in larger arena places when we've been asked to open, say, for a hockey match or something, and that was great. But the whole idea is that really, if an audience knows the song, they'd sing along, and there would be that call and response. There is, I hope, a lot in there that people can.
It was a great song, and that's that's the note that I wrote, though. The others, another note that I wrote down was for Starlight Lady.
Okay, there's a story to that.
And the note that I wrote was epic sound, possibly my favorite. I was going back and forth between Starlight Lady and Hey, What Do You Want Me to Be? I liked all of them, though. But tell me the story behind Starlight Lady. So
okay, so Starlight Lady is a true story, but not. It was inspired by. Now, here's what's interesting. It's only been the last few weeks I talked to somebody else who had a similar sort of experience, and she goes around trying to make these experiences. Essentially, it's one of those things that I think a lot of people have had. Very typically, you can be in a completely unusual place, walking down the road, on a bus, whatever, and you might catch that person's eye. And it's not one of those like in a restaurant where you look and you look and you look and pretend, they're not looking at me. Yeah, they are. You don't know if it's good or bad. I'm talking about when you might transiently just cross eyes. They're going that way, you're going that way, and you go, there was a moment, there really was. I know
There
that
was a
she
connection.
thought
Yeah.
something. Yeah. But I never followed through, never was followed through. But in the song I made it was, yeah, of course, you made this boy a man. But I used to walk this, sound like old man here. I used to walk 5 and a bit miles to the used music store down in Sutton High Street from where I live on the A217. You English people will maybe be able to look that up or know it. And then I was walking back one time, and I remember, it was just summertime sometime. The sun was low in the sky, but not gone. And I decided to stop off at a this rec center or something, and to get a soda. And this girl just was again like that, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I went straight back and I started playing these chords, but I hadn't really got the full song together. And then sometime, I don't know when, later, I saw at the bus stop on the other side of the street walking along. And it was notable to me at the time because it was right as punk was sort of starting, right around the Clash and so on. Or just sort of out of the Sex Pistols and sort of more as a Clash. It started refining in a way, which of course should have been against its religion, but it was. And so to be a punk back then, to really stick out, didn't take very much because it hadn't been established so much as now, where if you're going that far into the radical imagery, it takes a lot of work and money. I mean, what does it take to get 3,000 piercings and tats and do something to your hair and all that kind of stuff? You had a lot of maintenance to do that, a lot of effort. I'm too lazy. So anyway, I remember seeing this girl with very light pink roofy hair, just not spiky, not just big. She's wearing leather pants, trousers to my English friends, because that would be even extra weird. And then so I remember clip clop clip clop, and she's walking around. She just went by, didn't even see me. But what it reminded me of, interestingly enough, is whenever if you've ever seen a hawk or something, they are all glamour, and they go by, they don't even pay attention to you. There's no real connection other than, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah.
So I just remember seeing this girl, and it really didn't take much for her to stick out, because again, it was a summer day, so she was wearing a white button-down shirt, the leather and the hair.
Right.
I didn't think much out of it at the time, other than, okay, now I've got all the components in my mind of, like, I've got to write a song about this. So I did those chords, wrote the song. I was feeling weary at the end of the day, following the track back home, making my way. Something stirred in the air. I lifted my gaze. So there's the story, and then I turned it into, we took, walked into the sunset,
Right.
and then also Mead on they've got some great musicians. The piano, I did it on guitar, but I knew it had to be piano. I'm not a good enough piano player to do it that way, so I got Dan Waldis to play, and he's a great jazz player, and then Mead Stedman to play the sax on it, which was a bit of a stretch for me, because up until I'd heard Mead play, I didn't really like a lot of sax except for Baker Street. So I was like, hey, let's try it. I'm not sure I'm going to like it. I love it. He's fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's why I wrote Favorite down. And the only reason I went back and forth between it and What Do You Want Me to Be, I think, it's just because the other was a pool hall rocker. I mean,
yes. Well, there's a consummating part to this story of Starlight Lady, which is why
I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but
no. You don't know the story. So anyway, so that was recorded in '94.
Okay.
And but I had written the song in what would have probably been '82, something like that. So long time ago. Those original drums were recorded in 94. Then I did the redo. And then just totally random, nothing to do with the music. I hadn't even been talking about my music to a friend of mine's younger brother, who he used to come to our shows in England when I had a band called Greystone Man. It was the high school. So hi to all those guys who are still, they're all still alive. And so that was it. We just became friends. And what united us was motorcycles. And because I was riding back then and did a little bit over here, and then he's really still big into bikes. And so I just sent him something, a meme, a motorcycle meme, and he goes out of the blue. He says, "My girlfriend thinks she knows you." I was thinking, okay, don't know. And so we ended up actually talking. She was saying that, did she know me from bars? Well, I wasn't a barfly. I wasn't doing that stuff. I just wasn't interested. I just, what? So it wasn't that. She was a bit older than me, and so different world. And I was trying to think, what is it? And then she sent some pictures of when she was younger, and I went, wait a minute, that's that girl.
Wow.
That's that blonde. But she didn't have the pink hair. And she said, yeah, but I hadn't said that at the time. She said, oh yeah, I was the only punk in Kingswood, that was the upper class area across the road from where we lived, across the carriageway. And she said, yeah, that was it. And we started talking. Coincidentally, she after that went to go and work with the Clash and Chrysalis Records and Virgin Records, and right as all of that stuff was blooming, she was part of that and disappeared, and that was it. So then I said, do you want to hear the song? It's not a love song about you. I don't know you. And I'm saying to Simon, her boyfriend, my friend's younger, brother, this isn't a come on to your girlfriend. But what a story. So we talked about it, and I played it to her, and she called me and goes, why did you wait so long? I said, I didn't know who you were.
Didn't know you. Wow.
Yeah. And so, right. And this has been sort of slowly oozing out. I've been doing other things, and I really want to get the music. This is the year of the Nick, right. Finally out. And, I'm pretty sure if we can get something together, I would like to shoot there on that road. Cool. It would be great to do it. It's getting all of the resource together and the time, and I've come to the conclusion it doesn't matter whether there's a checks and balances to the whole thing financially. Let's just do it. So I'm gonna do it, one way or another. But you got to motivate a crew and do all of that. So then next one that you wanted to talk about.
Well, it was the last one. It was, what do you want me to be?
Well, you missed one out.
Oh, hey, what do you want? Oh, did I?
Well, no, and then Bring Me Home.
Oh yeah, Bring Me Home. Sorry, I thought I checked them off here.
That's all right.
Let's go back to Bring Me Home, and then we'll end with the last song.
So Bring Me Home was called numerous different things. Originally, the melody came from just a jam, and I'd already had some chords, and then I just did some lead over it and thought, hey, that works, and that's the melody, and I remembered it. Luckily, I remembered that one. And it became another song, and then another song, and then it went back to this one. I'd recorded a version of it in 92 it was a duet with a female singer. And then I wanted to do that again, but the original singer on it did a really good job, but wasn't interested in doing it. I don't exactly know why. She's moved out state. She's a mom, probably not her thing. Yeah. And so I thought, well, who do we get to do this? Well, on tour with Air Supply, I'd actually run into this singer who I thought was really good. She opened for them in California. And there's some other people I'd thought about asking as well, but Misty Rosas, who I then found out after that she was she plays in The Mandalorian, the Kuel character. She's in the
Ah,
rubber suit, but it's Nick Nolte voices.
okay.
So she's actually a stunt girl, but I didn't know that.
Okay. That's cool.
Yes, when I just knew her as a singer, and we sort of stayed in touch. But she said the range was too high, and I thought, too high? I bet I could hit that, but it is really high. So I just did it for the fun of it, and it's one of those things that people have heard the original version, and some people hear it now just say that's too high, doesn't sound right. Other people like it, so I'm going to go with it because it's freaky. So, it is. I mean, it is really high. It's all the way up there. So, but it's a song that generally people seem to like. It's nothing new and in the statement it makes about somebody who feels that they're separated from somebody that they
Right.
are connected with, and it could be a dog, it could be their car, it could be uh you know I I had some imagery in my mind, but I realized that that doesn't necessarily apply. But we're hoping to do the video on that one probably first, because a good friend of mine can get us aircraft interior.
Nice.
So yeah, we can do that.
Well,
And I want to go ahead.
I was
Yeah.
gonna say that's a good thing about music, though. It's up to your interpretation and what it means to you.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I had a good conversation with a young lady. Her name's Brooke Singer, New Zealand band French for Rabbits, and she's a wonderful musician. You need to go check them out. They're a New Zealand group, and all their music is lyrically driven. They tell stories,
Mm.
and I forget exactly which song it was, but we were talking about the different perspectives and how I interpreted one of her songs completely different than the way she intended it for herself. So that's what makes music awesome. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you want me to be? That
Hey,
song. All right. So
yeah,
that is,
yeah, that one I just had fun with. I was over here just
well, what did you get from it?
it made me feel good. I mean, I wrote down my note was a fun pool hall rocker, and you have here in this little description anthem for the individual. So I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun song. That's what I got out of it. But
I'd
I
have
don't
to
know.
say that the various inspiration for that was it's a blues progression. It's power blues, modern, uh, fairly quick. It was, I would say, probably my immaturity from my divorce. Probably accurate, but also immature from the
Yeah,
standpoint of, well, what do you want me to be? I wasn't perfect for you.
right.
With the benefit of hindsight, you know, all relationships are 50-50, or at least 100% of everybody, 100% you, 100% me. So what do you want me to be? Well, partly my mistake in, well, everything about the
Right.
relationship. Anyway, that was a long, 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 long time ago. And so I'd written that with that as an impulse. And I started realizing, well, there's some other things in society, and religions and so on, that there's a mold, perhaps.
Yeah.
Sometimes those things change, even tastes of music. I remember growing up through the heavy metal years, and people would, there were kids that I knew really liked the music, but other kids would say to them, well, you're plastic, you're not real, you don't really like that, you're
Right.
not. I mean, I don't even know how do you prove that what does that mean? Like, I had a girlfriend. My very first girlfriend had Metallica and Neil Diamond in her collection. Did that mean she wasn't really into both of those? Why couldn't you be all of those things? And so, um,
Exactly.
and so I just wanted to do something that had a little bit of a riff, and the girls came in and sang the call and response, and I think that probably it's 50% of the song, because they're really good. The
Right.
hey, they're coming back at you, and it's got sass, hasn't it? And
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and
Yeah.
were sassy girls. Oh yeah, they were. Yeah, I don't even know how to catch up with any of them now. But they, if we had shot a video with them now, it would have been, Robert Palmer-esque or something. We could have done something like that.
You put
And
that vision in my brain. That's pretty cool.
and the fun thing for me is that I don't know if you listened, really deeply. I get the impression you probably do, but there's some slide stuff in there, and one of my favorite parts of it is I didn't know what to do at the end of the lead, and it's kind of really changed, got back into the verse, so I just went. He just kept on the sustain all the way down till it died, and I love that. I love listening to that bit of it, because it just goes. It's like wheezing. I'm just done trying to work this out.
Exactly. Oh man. Well, Nick, I've had a great time chatting with you today. I really did.
Likewise, Charles.
So I'm going to let you chat a little bit more. I want you to tell my listening audience where they can find you, where they can get your music,
Right.
where they can find your social media. Let you get all of that out there. I'll put links below, so guys, you can just click on the links. But I'm going to be quiet once more and let Nick share where you can find them.
If you'd like to come and visit me at the Nickoverse, it's www.nykfry.com. From there, you can get to the socials, but obviously it's the same. NYKFRY is my name. And at the moment, I'm the only one on the internet. And there are other Nick Frys, though. There is a guy in England who's a musician as well. NICK, not that one. Go see his stuff. He has a great name. However, if you want the real Nick Fry, nykfry.com, and from there, who knows if there's going to be any spoof versions or anything, but you should be able to tell if it's a real thing.
Right.
And it's on all sorts of streaming, everything, Spotify and all that kind of stuff. It is this stuff in it. It's just a volcano that's, I don't know if it will actually erupt, but it might go.
Well, I did check out Nick's website. He's right. All of the links are right there. So you can click on Spotify, iTunes, all the, music digital platforms. You can find them pretty much everywhere. And all of his social media links are there. So I'll definitely put a link to his website below. So all you have to do is click it. And I am Charles Campbell, your small town horror author. My latest release is called The Piano Witch. And be sure to go check that out. You can go to valleyboypublications.com. I have 13 other books you can choose from, so check it out. You can find our Facebook page at Backstage 421, the Musicians Only Podcast Facebook page. You can follow me on Instagram under Charles Campbell Author. I also host a horror podcast called Horror 421, the podcast, so make sure you listen and subscribe to that as well. And outside of that, thank you for listening to episode 1 of season 2 of Backstage 421, the Musicians Only Podcast. If I could speak this evening, thank you once again, Nick. You guys have a great rest of your week, day, wherever you're at in life. We appreciate you listening.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Backstage 421, the Musicians Only Podcast. Be sure to tune in for the next episode. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Listener support links can be found below. Thank you for your support.